See, yeah, that's the right time.
Hear my lungs.
Okay.
And you see, no, Richard knows how to do everything like that. Yeah, he knows everything. La 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 la. That's what he'll be doing. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's really not. I've never been here before. Time starts to go really slowly, doesn't it? It's still 27 minutes past.
It's now 28
Oh,
minutes
yes.
past.
On Monday morning, I met Anne, who I was co-hosting the conference with, and my train was a bit late, so I didn't meet at 9 o'clock. The event didn't start till already. The doors didn't open at 9:30.
Yeah.
I wanted to get there at 8:30, and we had everything ready anyway. But I still wanted to be there an hour early.
Yeah.
And it really did go slow. I changed my increased on that. I could do it.
Is this my drink?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Are you on?
Yeah.
You want to be?
It's on the waiting room chat room. So.
Okay. So the chat will come up. Where will the chat come up for me, Zainab? Down at the bottom.
here.
Okay.
And so this is the chat room.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it will come up and then it will scroll through. So I'll need to make a
Yes.
note of a question if I see it, so we don't lose it.
Okay.
And then it's 12. I'm going to say we've got 40 people registered. They won't know how many people are coming. So.
She's Amelia is on head of sustainability.
Oh, great.
Okay. So. Oh, sorry. Almost time. God, it just feels like it's lasting forever.
Are you going to switch it on this machine?
Yeah, I'll do that. There we go, it's time.
Okay, thanks, Zainab.
Start.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this morning's webinar. Before we get going with the introductions and the content, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes to let you settle down, get comfy. Anyone that's in the process of connecting, just let them take a second to do that. So bear with us 1 minute. There's lots of people joining, which is great. Okay, right, we're going to make a start now. A huge welcome to you all to this National Inclusion Week lunchtime webinar. Many of you will know that we've been running webinars through the week, one every day, on a range of different inclusion topics. I'm really pleased to say that we've had many people join the webinar, and we've got over 40 people signed up for the session today. My name is Claire Williams. I'm a director at Inclusive Employers, and before we get going, I mean, I can see from the guest list that many of you know Inclusive Employers already, and we've got lots of members with us. But obviously, National Inclusion is a campaign that's open to everybody. So there are people joining us who may not have come across Inclusive Employers before. So just to let you know, we are a membership organisation. We focus on equality, diversity and inclusion. In the broader sense, we look at difference, so much broader than the 9 protected characteristics. And we work with our members and clients, delivering member support, training and consultancy to help them deliver their business or service objectives and deliver on their inclusion strategies. So we get involved in some great work. We've got members in every sector. So you're going to meet Glenn Willie in a minute, who works in the transportation sector. Later today, we are going to an event at the BFI, we've got membership in public, private and third sector organisations, so it's brilliant. It's a fantastic network to be part of. National Inclusion Week is our biggest campaign every year. So this year we are working in partnership with Sky, as you can see from the slide, and we're delighted to say that over 750 organisations have signed up, which gives reach into the millions, we think, in terms of individual employees who get access to materials and resources through National Inclusion Week, which is fantastic. Every day we have had daily challenges, and we hope that you have done or plan to do today's daily challenge, which is share your story. Simple things that are all focused on making inclusion an everyday reality. So that's me, Inclusive Employers and National Inclusion Week, but I know that you're here to listen to the expert words of our guest, who is Glenn Willey, Diversity and Inclusion Manager at South Western Railway. Welcome, Glenn.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy National Inclusion Week.
Before we kick off, I've just got some housekeeping matters that I need to deal with. Just on the technical side of things, if you've got any problems with the sound, please type in the chat and we'll do our best to help. We've got Zainab here with us today who will keep us on the straight and narrow in terms of anything technical. And I also understand that you've got a link in your joining instructions. So if you do have a problem, hopefully none of you will, but you can go via that link straight through to the people at Click Meeting, who are the professionals in all things technical, and they will be able to help. Hopefully we won't have any technical problems. Because we've got a lot of people joining the webinar, we've decided to keep the chat effectively, it's called moderated. What that means is that you can't see the questions that are coming in, but from our perspective it means that we can manage the questions in a way and hopefully theme them properly so that we get you the very best possible experience in terms of what you hear and what we cover. So please do feel free to ask questions as we go by typing them in the chat box. We'll do our very best to answer them as we go, but obviously there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the webinar. We're scheduled to run for just under an hour now. If you've got questions about the content, ask them, but obviously please feel free to ask questions in a wider context. I mean, Glenn and I hopefully are in a position to answer a very wide range of diversity and inclusion questions. So if something sparks a connection for you, we're happy to be quite broad in terms of content. The session is being recorded and we'll send it out to you within the next, well, you probably have it by Monday, being realistic, so that you can then listen to it again, maybe share it with your networks or your colleagues who might not have been able to join us today. So that's it by way of introduction. I hope that makes sense to everybody. I'd like to start now by saying hello again to Glenn, and maybe asking Glenn, could you give us a little bit of an introduction to your background and what's brought you here to this point?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Claire. So, as I mentioned, I'm the Inclusion and Diversity Manager at South Western Railway. I've been there since March this year, and before that I was the Inclusion and Diversity Manager at Great Western Railway. My background, I suppose, really is the fire service. I was an operational firefighter with Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service for over 20 years. And during that time, I got involved in community engagement, working with diverse communities, prevention work. So really some work getting out into our communities and just understanding how our communities work, how we can make them safer, and how we can engage with and connect organisations to our communities. And that work carried on once I left the service and went into Great Western Railway, and then also now in South Western Railway. So that's me really. Inclusion and diversity for me is just about allowing people to be the best they can be at work, bringing their whole selves to work. I'm a great believer in getting up in the morning with a smile on my face and thinking, you know, I'm one of the luckiest people alive because I've got a great job, and we spend an awful lot of time at work, and I think it's really important that we enjoy that time. And if I can do anything to help people improve their work life, or feel relaxed at work, or be the best they can be at work, then I think in my position as inclusion and diversity manager that allows me to do that.
Okay, that's lovely, Glenn. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, do you want us to take us through the agenda for the session?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to talk a bit about the business case, why we do it, why is community engagement or making connections within our communities important, and that will be different for whatever organisation you're in. We're going to be talking about how we connect our colleagues and communities and the opportunities that brings. So for me, it's not all about the opportunities for our community organisations. It's also about our people, our staff, to be able to take advantage of those connections as well. The opportunities for the organisation to attract diverse talent, and I know that it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment, especially in the transport industry. So we will be concentrating on gender diversity or vein diversity within the transport industry, in the rail industry, around those traditionally male roles. So we will have a chat about the opportunities that community engagement brings for that. The importance of building an inclusive brand, and I will emphasise the importance for me of projecting an inclusive brand while aligning that to the real life lived experiences of our colleagues. So I'm a big believer in walking the walk. If we're going to be talking the talk, we will all recognise organisations out there that might have a great inclusive brand, but actually behind the scenes, there's a lot of money and talk behind that, but actually not much substance. So we'll talk about the importance of that, and then we're finishing off with some maybe some Glenn Woolley top tips on community engagement.
That sounds fantastic. I mean, we try very hard at Inclusive Employers to always make sure that our advice is very, very practical. So I'm looking forward to hearing those top tips, Glenn. Okay, so let's just sort of go back to basics really and reflect a little bit on why this whole subject is so important, Glenn. What is the driver? What is the business case for the requirement or the objective of engaging with communities?
Okay, so I mentioned previously that would be different for different organisations. We'll all have those CSR objectives. We will all have those scenarios, those objectives within our organisations where we want to get the most out of it, and we want to improve the lives for people living in our communities. From a emergency services point of view, those connections meant that we made people's lives safer. From a rail industry point of view, those connections are hopefully improving the way people commute into work or use our industry to sort of relax and enjoy maybe some of the attractions around our network. So we'll all be looking towards that business case, and I think it's important that we have that plan in place so we can reach the levels of success that those initiatives, those projects, those programs allow us to reach, really. So for me, there's a piece on, for example, in the rail industry, our business case was kind of landed on my desk, was part of the franchise commitment. So that business case was there for me. I got an objective given to me by the Department for Transport, if you like, and the Prince's Trust was named in that engagement piece, which I'll go into a little bit more. And so that for some of us, it will come in. It will come in that form.
So it's for the rail industry, then it's a very clear requirement set by government, basically, which is you can't really argue with that, can you? And with the fire service, a completely different sort of organisation, public sector. We can all see the community safety benefits of actually understanding the makeup of the community. Do you think there's any challenge with other types of organisation that might be more, I'm struggling to find the right words here. What I'm trying to say is more balance sheet driven, so more about profit.
Oh, definitely. I think from a foreign ministry service point of view, you know, we were welcomed wherever we went. We were welcomed with open arms. People wanted to be involved in community work with Hampshire Foreign Ministry Service or any foreign ministry service. It was certainly a plus point for any community event or any community engagement initiative. Certainly, we don't have that opportunity as a rail industry. Maybe private industry don't always have those opportunities. People, you know, asking for that engagement for those particular organisations. We've got to do the hard graft, and we've got to link into some organisations that we can see some real benefit. And you know, we'll talk about that building a brand a little bit later. But you know, we've got to identify those opportunities. It's certainly there's more effort to be put in from the private sector, rather than from an emergency services sector.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm going to put a question out to colleagues who are actually joining the webinar. Just really to ask you whether you have had any difficulties getting your employer, whether you're a business or a charity or a service, to actually understand the benefits of engaging with communities. So we'd be interested to hear your input. And it may be that we can sort of discuss any points that you make or challenges that you face. So please do get in contact if you think that would be useful to you. Okay, so the business case for many organisations is really, really clear. And in the rail industry, if it's a franchise commitment, then it's got to be done. It's got to be delivered. Shall we move on to look at connecting colleagues to communities and understand what that actually means? So, I mean, what is the difference between connecting and engaging? Anyway, what is the difference? Tell us.
Okay, so I'm sure this would be people have their own different ways of describing this, but for me, it's pretty simple, really. It's kind of like the next step in the process. So. We're going to start with engagement, and we'd all probably start with engagement. And this is an incredibly important part of the process. It's where we're out there in the communities, attending events, being visible, talking to our communities, talking to our people that are maybe already working or volunteering in our communities. For me, engagement is really about putting in the hard graft, understanding the needs of our communities, what they want, what they need from us, what do they expect from us. But it's about being accessible as well and seeing where we can make a difference, answering those questions from those community organisations, you know, but also looking at what the community can do to improve our business or our organisation, and really taking advantage of those opportunities. And again, I keep hearing the phrase at the moment around, you know, finances are tight everywhere, but stealing with pride, kind of, you know, piggybacking on some amazing best practice that we see around the industry. I'm certainly not shy of picking up on best practice and using that if we know that it works. So for me, that's engagement, the blood, sweat and tears, if you like, getting out there and getting and meeting people. For me, connecting is that next step. It's about you know, those business decisions. What are the outcomes of our engagements with communities? Connecting to community is about making those informed decisions so we can progress, we can action some of those conversations, we can you know, put back into the communities exactly what they've told us what they want. It's kind of I kind of look at it a little bit like a Velcro piece. So engagement is really, like I say, the blood, sweat and tears. The connection is where we really get our hooks into each other, and there's a link, a bond there between those organisations out in the community and ourselves, whether that be the Foreign Ministry Service or South Western Railway.
Yeah. Just to ask you a question, it might sound a little bit naive, Glenn, but how do you know who your community is? Okay, so that's a really good question, and that's, you know, again, it comes down to getting out there. Just putting your trainers on, getting out of your suit sometimes, and just getting in and amongst your communities. It might mean that you're taking yourself away out of your comfort zone.
but you've got to get out there and meet your people, meet the people within your organisations that are maybe already doing some work in the communities, but just getting out there and speaking to people, doing some research around, you know, Google is my friend. You know, it's about putting in the hard work, leaving no stone unturned, and getting out of your comfort zone. Definitely putting yourself in situations where you think, you know, is this right for us? And sometimes you will hit dead ends, but it's it's about being open to that as well.
So, I mean, if you were using Google to do that sort of research, if you put in a question, who is our community, you're going to get something very broad, aren't you? What are the nuts and bolts of the questions that you might ask to try and work out who is out there that you need to connect with? You're
already going to have some idea of where your engagement is going to go, and you get that initially from the colleagues that you're working with. They're going to be the people that are already out there on the ground. So, for example, in the Fire and Rescue Service, you know, in Hampshire, we had 52 stations around Hampshire. They're the people that I'd go to first of all to get that knowledge, to get that expertise. They are our communities at the end of the day. And similarly, in the rail industry, you know, over 250 stations across the South West Railway network. People that are working in those stations are our communities. They're living in our communities. They're supporting our communities. So that would be my first port of call.
Great. Really. Okay, that makes a huge amount of sense. So it's, I suppose the important thing is to get that awareness raised within the organisation amongst your own staff. So people are thinking about this in terms of what they can do to help the business, what they can do to help the community, and actually understanding the business case that we started off with. Okay, so back to you then, Glenn. You've got a bullet point on your slide there, targeted activities.
Yeah, again, so that comes from conversations. You're going to work out who you want to target, what initiatives you want to focus on. Again, I'll give a couple of examples from fire service and the rail industry. We had a engagement event probably going back 10 or 12 years ago now in the Fire and Rescue Service around reducing fire calls across our communities, and this predominantly resulted in thousands of smoke detectors being put up in properties across Hampshire. Initially, we didn't see a difference in the amount of fire calls that we were receiving, and on a bit of investigation, having those that hard work of getting out to ask those questions in those communities, we found out that, you know, we were hitting the easy to reach members of our communities, those people that wanted help, those people that were happy to come and ask for the fire service to come around to their properties and put up smoke detectors. We got to that stage through hard work, through conversations, through engagement initiatives, reaching out to communities that we'd never been into before, taking fire engines and taking firefighters around to schools and parts of the community that we'd never been to before, unless it was for like a fire incident. So that's how we then decided, well, we've got areas, we've got parts of the community that we can actually target. And following that piece of work, you know, most of us will have seen the headlines over the last, you know, 5, 10, 15 years that those fire calls started to take a downward turn, which was really good. In South Western Railway, we had a franchise committee around community engagement and supporting young people, and we can do this in a few ways. The Prince's Trust, for example, which I'll go into detail quite a bit this afternoon, but for us, it wasn't just a case of you know, the Prince's Trust are going to be one of our partners. We wanted to make the most of that. So our targeted activity there was just to make sure that the young people that were engaging with the Prince's Trust programme could get the absolute most out of working with South Western Railway. So, you know, we invested time in understanding how the Prince's Trust work. We invested time in our people and letting them know about the Prince's Trust partnership. So it's just once you've got that activity, once you've got that connection, it's about bringing it all together and just making sure that it's not just for me, it's not just ticking the boxes and making sure we reach the minimum standard.
Yeah.
If we're going to do it, let's do it to the best
Yeah.
of our ability.
Just a quick question's coming, Glenn. So what is the Prince's Trust? How does that, what's that organisation all about?
Okay, so the Prince's Trust is the largest youth organisation charity in the country. It started 40 years ago, maybe just over 40 years ago now, by Prince Charles. And they support young people predominantly from what they class as disadvantaged backgrounds. The age group that we work with is around about 18 to 30. Young people that aren't in education, employment or training. We partner with the Prince's Trust in two areas. Their Get Into programme, which deals with employability skills and work placement, and Achieve Clubs, which deals with young people in years 10 and 11, and we'll be working with them in the future around highway safety and changing some of those stereotypes with regards to careers in the rail industry. Our work at the Prince's Trust has been going on now for about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Did you want me to go into the programme yet, or?
It's entirely up to you.
Okay.
Talk about it now. Can talk about it later.
So the idea of the Prince's Trust really is they've given themselves a bit of a target to, when it came up for 4 years, they wanted to get to that, helping 1 million young people by the time they got to their 4 years. And you know, an organisation like South Western Railway can help them do that. Like I said before, we've got over 200 stations where we can help these young people have practical workplace experience. So yeah, maybe I'll say a little bit.
Okay. I mean, just listening to that, for me, thinking about inclusion within organisations and the sort of wider societal context that we're all operating in at the moment, that work with the Prince's Trust must be hugely beneficial in terms of delivering on strategic goals. So you can see how for many employers, that sort of engagement piece really is evidence that there's really effective work going on within D&I teams that's making a difference to achieving strategic goals. But the other thing, of course, is that we are in a situation of full employment. And so, I mean, Glenn will talk about talent issues later, but, you know, we're all in a big competition for talent. And if you can bring people in and engage with them at that early stage, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we do. I've mentioned those stereotypes. You know, we really do try and take the widest pool of talent possible with regards to that Prince's Trust. So we're working with the Prince's Trust outreach teams to try and attract as many different people into the programs as possible, but also with the job centres as well. They've got that knowledge of the young people. So even before the programme start, we can take 14 young people onto a Prince's Trust programme. We're probably engaged with about 50 beforehand, and we've already had some successes of those people. Just that initial interaction with the young people across our network are now engaged in that application process to join South Western Railway. Fantastic.
Do you set yourself any diversity targets in relation to your Prince's Trust young people?
Okay, so targets is an interesting question around inclusion and diversity, and we're like a lot of organisations having that conversation at this moment. Do we put targets on figures or not? For us, it's a bit more of a holistic view, really, with regards to targets. You know, we've got some objectives around gender diversity and bank diversity, but we're very conscious that we always want to take the best people for the jobs, and we believe that expanding that network out into our communities, engaging with lots of different organisations, will allow us to promote the South Western Railway brand to a huge number of people that maybe wouldn't have been interested in a career in the rail industry before. So I think those, when we talk about diversity in the rail industry, we will start to see an upward trend with regards to gender diversity. So,
and just going back to what you were saying about the outreach work that the fire service were involved in, and that sort of amazing opportunity really to save lives by outreach to communities that previously there'd been some sort of barrier, presumably. Can you give us any specific examples of communities that you were able to access?
Well, sure. So the area of the country that I was working in predominantly was Portsmouth. So again, we'd have some communities that would be described as disadvantaged. We'd have some areas where maybe English wasn't a first language. We'd have some areas of the community where maybe styles of cooking presented an issue with regards to fire safety. So those were the areas. Once we'd got into the communities and understood this, going to community events at different parts of the city, we could start to understand actually these are the people that we are turning up with our blue lights and sirens flashing, week after week, and actually we're not getting in there and doing that community engagement piece.
So it's all about rescue rather than prevention, and what you need to be doing. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I mean that sort of maybe leads us on to the next slide, which is around the talent piece, because presumably accessing communities just accesses them as a source of talent as well, potentially.
Definitely. So going back to the rail industry now, we don't have an issue with recruiting people into the rail industry. We recently had a driver, about 10 driver vacancies. We had 6,000 people apply. Now, amazingly, out of those 6,000 people, I think around about 96% of those were white men. And the majority of those white men were probably in their, I know that were in their 40s and 50s. And this is the issue we've got now. I'm not saying that they're not the best drivers. I'm just saying that at the moment we're not attracting a diverse pool of people into the rail industry. So that's what these community engagement opportunities bring us, getting out into those communities, just exposing different parts of our network to South Western Railway, for example. They're not expecting South Western Railway to be engaging in some of these events. Recently we played an integral part in Southampton Pride. And if you get the chance, go on Southampton Echo's website and have a look at the gallery, and you'll see South Western Railway flags, in nearly every photo. That for us is a real positive news story, but it's what we need to do to get out into the communities, different communities, and just say South Western Railway is here, it's part of your community, but it might not be quite the organisation that you think it is.
I suppose somebody that's not working for the fire service or for a train operating company, they are organisations with very particular stereotypes around firefighters and train drivers, aren't they? So that in itself must be a barrier that causes problems.
It is. I mean, there are so many good marketing campaigns at the moment that are identifying those industries that have stereotypical roles in them. And I think, certainly the rail industry, and we'll be doing some work in the very near future around, discussing what young people want to be in the future, and one, actually, whether those roles will actually exist in 10, 15, 20 years time. But I know from experience, asking young people what they want to be when they grow up, and some boys will say they want to be a train driver, or they want to be an engineer, or they want to work in the on trains or on the railway. Very rarely do I have those conversations with girls or young women.
I mean, incidentally, there's loads of material around sort of busting some of these myths. So if anyone on the webinar is interested in getting any further resources around this sort of thing, then please get in touch with Inclusive Employers, because we can probably support you on that. I'm not sure, I can't see the whole list of delegates, but I don't know if we've got anyone from Enterprise Rent-A-Car on the webinar, but a similar case study that I was told a couple of years ago, which has stayed with me because it was so powerful, was around recognising the need to engage with the BAME community in the northwest of England, particularly Asian communities, and Enterprise, who are an amazing inclusive employer, realised that the way to actually shift the dial in terms of attracting diverse talent, and they were interested in recruiting more Asian women into their business, was actually to connect with the communities in the widest sense. So invite whole communities into the business, parents, elders, a much more than just the particular individual that you might want to recruit, and have a cup of tea and have a cake and a chat about what our values are and what we're all about, and really sort of break down those sorts of barriers of perception, I suppose, and it made a difference. So I think for many of our members, it's about being creative and perhaps sometimes being quite bold and courageous, but that's what's going to make the difference. That's what's going to make your business better than your competitor, I guess.
I think if I can just sort of back that up, Claire, I've been, I'm very lucky in the Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, Great Western Railway and South Western Railway have all been members of Inclusive Employers. And I'm not just saying this because we're here today, I promise. But it is,
I'm not bribing him.
There are experts out there that are members of Inclusive Employers, and you're not being a member of Inclusive Employers. You've got that knowledge around the country.
Yeah.
You've got that ability to ask questions: what works, what doesn't work. Being in the Fire and Rescue Service, there are other Fire and Rescue Services that are members of Inclusive Employers, and so you've got those links. Yeah. There are other train operating companies that are members of Inclusive Employers, so you can share that best practice. You've got those links there as well.
I promise I didn't get Glenn on this webinar to do an advert. That wasn't planned.
But it is about taking those opportunities.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so let's focus back onto our slide, attracting diverse talent. So you talked about, we've talked about stereotypes. What are the opportunities for colleagues?
Okay, so this is really important for me, because when we talk about community engagement or making those connections with communities, a lot of people will be looking at what's in it for those people out in our communities. But for me, it's a two-way thing. It's really about identifying those opportunities for colleagues and getting the most out of it for the organisation, as well as for those people around and about our network. So for me, there are several things that colleagues can not just take advantage of, but for us maybe to spot some of that talent that's about in our organisation, that if we didn't have these connections, maybe would go unnoticed. There are opportunities. So taking the Prince's Trust programme, for example, on the last programme down in Southampton and Portsmouth and Bournemouth, we had over 40 colleagues internally supporting that programme. Now these were colleagues that wouldn't have had that opportunity to get involved, to perhaps that are thinking about getting involved in some peer training. Yeah. The Prince's Trust gave us that opportunity for them to dip their toes in, if they're like, with some support. Some people that are thinking of going forward for supervisory roles, the Prince's Trust programme gave them the opportunity just to dip their toes in, test the water, see what they thought about taking charge of certain situations. And these could be people that have been in our organisation for 7, 10, 15 years. Again, it's just about witness or seeing those opportunities and giving people the opportunity to kind of like take advantage of those opportunities that come along.
I suppose in organisations where you get people who've been there for many, many years, and there might not be an awful lot of churn, so there might not be that many promotion opportunities. We've all got to look at lateral development, haven't we? And it presents organisations and employers with the opportunity to give somebody something fresh to do and new to think about and stretch themselves.
Oh, a perfect example of this was the first morning of the Prince's Trust programme that we run. I went down to one of the stations and was speaking to a platform assistant who'd been working on the same platform for 12 years, had very serious reservations about us engaging with young people in the community. I got an email from her 6 hours later stating that it's the best thing she's ever done, one of the best days of work she's ever had.
Wow.
And how that in the future, if there's ever any opportunities to get involved in the programme, that her name should be first on the list. That's the power of community engagement for me. That's the difference it can make to some of our people.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a very inspiring example, Glenn. Okay, we move on and talk about brand. So let's move on to the next slide. So we've talked a lot about communities and about staff. What are the issues around this sort of wider marketing and brand piece, Glenn, in terms of community engagement?
So I think this is a really important piece for me, and it's certainly a conversation that a lot of us will be having at the moment. How we project project an inclusive brand,
Yeah.
and how we can do that while kind of like being authentic, really making sure that what we're projecting is a reality for our people internally. What we're telling people we're like as an organisation, actually that's reflected in a lived experience for our people. So it's important because we've got to be quite careful about this for me. And I've already mentioned it a little bit earlier. There's opportunities for us to, balloons and banners about how great South Western Railway are, or Great Western Railway are, or Hampshire Fire and Rescue are. But actually, if we're not walking the walk after talking the talk, it can cause an awful lot of damage to the not just to the business, to the industry. And when we talk about industry, we've all seen the headlines. If something goes badly wrong in the north of the country, whether in the rail industry, it can affect the conversations people are having in the south of the country with regards to the organisations. So inclusive brand is all about authenticity for me. It's all about doing the right thing. It's all about keeping it real. It's all about being able to be honest. I think there's a real piece here around admitting when you get something wrong, being brave enough, taking some brave decisions to stop things if they're not going the way that you want it. I always say that inclusive cultures at the moment are cultures. You've got to be prepared to stop something, even if that means you're the one that says, you know what, we got it wrong. We need to take a different direction. That all builds, I think, to building that inclusive brand, and people will see that. You can't fake that. You can't fake an inclusive brand for too long. You'll get found out. So for me, it's about honesty. It's about authenticity, keeping it real, and hard work as well. It's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. We can't just pick people up from different genders, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and put them into the business. To take the driver role, for example, there's 18 months training to become a driver. There's potentially 3 or 4 years waiting list. I was talking to a driver yesterday who got accepted for a driver role and waited 5 years to get into the business. So it's not an overnight thing. It's hard work, but you've got to keep at it.
I mean, for me, it's that whole piece around having a truly embedded inclusion plan, so that your leaders are walking the walk, not just talking the talk, but all the way through to counter staff, or every single person in the organisation needs to have that sort of feeling of inclusion, so that because people can see it when it's not real, can't they?
Oh, definitely.
They can spot it.
Yeah, it starts from day one for me. Our corporate welcome, I'm very conscious that corporate welcomes, you're trying to inject enthusiasm in people. You're trying to let them know how great the organisation that they've just joined is, and it's really, really important that that's a real experience. I've heard horror stories of corporate welcomes where people are almost floating out of the room because they've had such a great 2 or 3 days in that initial welcome to an organisation, and they've joined a team, or they've joined a department where that isn't reflected. Reality isn't reflected in that lived experience.
It's a problem. So it's about having a truly embedded inclusion culture, isn't it? And I mean, that final bullet point around becoming an employer of choice, there's nothing better than people going out and meeting their mates or going to their clubs or whatever, and they're the very best advocate for a potential employer, aren't they? Because they actually say it as it is.
Without a doubt, and it's interesting because I'm working in this industry where we don't struggle to get people through the door. We do have people queuing up to join the rail industry, but for me, it's about that employer of choice being across our communities. It doesn't matter where you're from, or where you live, or who you are. The rail industry should be one of those industries that anyone thinks, actually, that's a career for me. And the rail industry also isn't about being a driver, guard, or someone that works on a station. If you're into marketing, if you're into IT, if you're into HR, if you're into anything and everything. We've got
Yeah.
over 100, 150 different roles
Yeah.
within the rail industry.
Yeah, good. So Glenn, I've got a couple of questions for you then. When you are developing your plans around community engagement, who do you choose to work with? Or it says how do you choose who to work with?
Okay, so again, good question, Claire. And for me, it's about, and I've said it before, and I apologise if people think I'm repeating myself, but it's really important that you get out there, you get into the community, you see who's doing what, you see which community organisations are, can align themselves to your values. You can see who your values align to in the community. For me, in the case of the Prince's Trust, I know we said that decision was already made, but actually, the Prince's Trust would be one of those organisations that we look to be working with. Similarly, some similar organisations like SE1 or the Mayor's Fund for London, very similar, ethical. They're doing the right thing. They're putting young people within our communities at the forefront of everything that they do.
Yeah. Obviously, the Prince's Trust is national.
It is,
so we must have people on the webinar from all around the country. So this.
And that's I've mentioned two London-based organisations there, but it's those community organisations that are supporting people in our communities that will be across the nation, similar to the Prince's Trust.
Okay. Yeah. Another question then, Glenn. What are the issues to think about when you design a programme?
Okay, so we've mentioned franchise commitments.
Yeah.
So that programme was already there. Glenn, the DFT, wants to run a youth community engagement programme. So that decision was already made, but there's still an awful lot of decisions still to make around things like return on investment. What are we getting out of it as well? They can be incredibly resource heavy, especially at the beginning. We had discussions around where best is it to locate these programs, where potentially if we've got vacancies coming up, ideally we want, so the programme is supporting young people, ideally we need supporting young people to have opportunities to gain employment with South Western Railway after the programme finishes. Now that's not always the case, but it's great if we can base these programmes in areas where they get that opportunity. So deciding on what stations we're going to link into, but also deciding where maybe, and especially at the beginning of the partnership, where are people that want to get engaged, that want to help out, that have that sort of like energy to support community engagement initiatives. And again, when do you do it? When in the year do you do it? That makes a real difference. I know if I was sort of like 18, 19, 20 years old and I was asked to stand on the platform in January, I'd probably have a completely different experience. If it was, and January, say, down in the New Forest, I'd have a completely different experience if it was summer somewhere in London, where it's going to be a lot more busier, perhaps Wimbledon, when we could take advantage of, the tennis crowds and all that. A completely different experience. So things like that we need to think about. Engaging with managers as well early on, getting them their buy-in, because they're the ones that can influence their teams. They're the ones that can decide within their teams who's going to support the programme as well, and identify, like we've already spoken about, some of those colleague opportunities, some of that peer training, those supervisory roles, who's going to step up and support the programme with us. And just, into the nuts and bolts of things, risk assessments. It's a safety critical organisation. The rail industry can be incredibly dangerous places, but because we're safety critical, we're actually incredibly safe places to work as well. But we do that because we're trained to be safe. So, going down to risk assessment after risk assessment after risk assessment. Lots of different layers with regards to risk, and making sure that the young people are as safe as possible and our people are as safe as possible as well. And sometimes having those difficult conversations. I'm not going to hide away from the fact that currently in the rail industry, there's some areas of the industry that are engaged in industrial action. We have to be prepared for that. We have to have backup plans. We have to make sure that we're flexible with our programs as well. And just how many young people we can support. Just, I wouldn't want to run a program where we're stretching our people so far that the young people aren't getting the best out of that opportunity.
Yeah.
Similarly, I don't want to just have a few young people on the program that have an amazing experience, but actually our time is being taken up by just 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of conversations to have across the business, and ultimately it comes down to colleague buy-in, that Prince's Trust seeing that South Western Railway are an employer of choice, and that's why we're working together.
Okay, brilliant. I think we should move on to top tips. I'm looking forward to these, Glenn. So, do you want to take us through the key things that you think people need to think about?
Sure. So, with regards to top tips, you might have been able to tell I don't mind talking. I quite like talking, and it really is from day one. Once you've kind of worked out what direction you want to take, it's all about engaging as many people as possible. First port of call for me really is your people, the people within your teams. Once you identify, what area of the business you're going to be working, getting as many people on board as you can. That comes from being prepared. That comes from having those answers to the questions that you're going to get, so you can you're not wasting any time. You're hitting the ground running. Excuse me, and hopefully you're bringing people with you. What this will also do is just allow you to identify that knowledge and that experience that you've already got in your organisation. Speaking about the Prince's Trust, going out and having these conversations, I was engaging people that were supported by the Prince's Trust when they were younger, so they want to get involved. I was engaging people with people that are actually volunteering for the Prince's Trust that no one in the business knew about. They were just out there doing it. And so there's some of the benefits that can come from talking to your people. Secondly, talking to your communities. You can't do this from sat behind a desk. You have got to get out there. You've got to meet people in your communities. You've got to have conversations with them. You've got to get on their level. You've got to understand how their organisation works, how their community works, how the people that they're supporting, what their needs are, what they want from the opportunities. Like I said, you could do that from behind a desk. You could have you could run a program sat in your office. You would be able to tick all the boxes doing that, but I think that's hard work. I think the best way to do it is get out, meet your communities.
It's all about people, isn't it? So if you can make those personal connections, you must be able to do it quicker.
And it makes it easier.
Yeah.
It makes it easier when when something does go wrong. It makes it easier to pick up a phone. And have a conversation about it. You're building relationships all the time.
And it's that trust, isn't it? So if somebody's met you, they have a sense of what you're about, and there's some trust there from the start. So a collaboration can start from day one. Definitely.
You'll have a relationship. It does make things easier. So we've also got managing expectations in there as well. So this is both from an organisational point of view and from those people out in the community's point of view. So taking the Prince's Trust, we will have, I guarantee, 14 young people who are engaging in a South Western Railway programme. They will be under the impression that they will be working for South Western Railway for the rest of their lives. This is an opportunity for them, and it's very, we've got to be very careful that we manage those expectations from the start. And again, that comes from conversations, that comes from being honest, that comes from telling people how it is straight away, that we're not wrapping anything up in bows and that kind of thing. We're being honest with people, and that also means that the young people have got to put something into the partnership as well. They've got to work hard. I've got some great stories of young people that would have been getting up at 11, 12 o'clock in the morning for the last 4 or 5 years, and then they're expected to come onto a month-long program and be in the training room at 9 o'clock in the morning. It can be a real challenge for some of the young people. Have fun, enjoy it. It certainly is for me some of the most rewarding time I've had in whatever organisation I've worked in. Community engagement for me gives me some of my greatest days at work. the Princess Trust celebration events, I am not ashamed to say that I will be in tears if I'm hearing the young people talk about the appreciation of the opportunities that they've had. And there's a sense of pride that comes with that because, you know, people in my organisation have facilitated an amazing experience for some of these young people. You know, you get to, through community engagement work, I've been to see, you know, the Mighty Portsmouth Football Club while I'm at work, you know, things like that. You know, it can be incredibly hard work, but the benefits, when you see the positive outcomes at the end of a program, at the end of an initiative, you know, you can sit back with a smile on your face and think, you know, that what an amazing opportunity that was. Think and do things differently. So this for me, I try and do something like this every single day. This is a bit of a mantra for me, and it means we have to, you know, look into areas we wouldn't normally look into, talk to people that maybe we wouldn't normally talk to people, and that's not just in our communities. That's potentially in our own organisations at all as well. So I think this incorporates getting out of your comfort zone as well, you know, putting yourself in those situations. And again, I do it an awful lot. I don't always mean to do it, but, you know, where I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable, maybe a little bit embarrassed, but actually, if it improves the life of someone, it's going to be worth it. If it makes someone safer, it's going to be worth it. Those are the headlines. You know, the fact that you feel a little bit uncomfortable about it for 5 or 10 minutes is really a byproduct.
I mean, that really links with the theme of National Inclusion Week this year, which is everyday inclusion. So it's all about doing things every day that actually improve levels of inclusion in your organisation.
Definitely. So I've got be prepared for conversations, lots of conversations. Now, these are conversations that initially you'll be initiating, getting out there, like we've said, and talking to lots of people. But the more that people hear about it, the more questions you'll have to answer, the more engagement opportunities you'll have, and you'll need to take advantage of. You know, it is hard work at the start, but that hard work, you know, actually pays off and it becomes easier. So we're just starting our second Princess Trust programme in South Western Railway next month. We've done the hard work. You know, it's still hard, don't get me wrong, but we've had those first conversations. We're now the next step along. Those teams in Waterloo or Clapham Junction, they know about the programme, so we don't have to introduce Princess Trust to the organisation anymore. And we've mentioned it quite a bit before as well. It's about getting out there. It's about spending time in communities, which is great. You know, who needs an excuse to get out of the office and to get, you know, jump on a train or get in a car and drive for half an hour and, you know, meet some people that we haven't met before. But again, it's about getting out there and doing it. You can do it over the phone, you can do it by email, you can do it behind a desk if you want. You will not have you will not get the best results that you can do. It's about being face to face.
Thank you. Fantastic top tips. I'm just conscious of time, so I really want to say, does anyone have any final questions? Please just pop them on the chat if you do. We'll wait a few minutes, give you a chance to type anything that you want to know about. And one of the interesting things that I've been thinking about during this webinar has been the link with between CSR and D&I, and connections that many people see. And at Inclusive Employers, we try and hold the line that diversity and inclusion is not, it's very much a business critical issue rather than a charitable activity. But clearly, from what Glenn's been saying, the business benefits of community engagement are huge in terms of all of these different issues that he's raised. So, Glenn, just can you give us some idea of what you think the greatest challenges are to community engagement?
So I suppose for me, it's probably the colleague buy-in for me. It's that those initial conversations in the organisation. If you're starting a whole new partnership, if you're starting to talk to a completely new organisation that you want to run something organisational wide, it's having that almost that business case for the partnership to get colleague buy-in, really. I think that's the greatest challenge. And again, like I've said before, it's about being prepared for those conversations, being prepared for the questions that you might get. And you will find out of those conversations also deliver some great opportunities. So through those conversations, you will pick up people that want to get on board and want to help out.
It sounds like resilience is quite important. I mean, you're a very enthusiastic and inspiring person, Glenn. But that must be difficult to be enthusiastic and inspiring 365 days of the year, I suppose. You
will have days where you'll have negativity after negativity after negativity, and you've got to look after yourself. You've got to. I think the bigger picture is if you know that if it's the right partnership, if you know it's the right organisation to get involved with, that'll keep you going. And that positivity, that personal positivity is great, but having that colleague engagement, you can feed off that energy as well.
Thank you for that question, Mo. Thank you all for your input to this session. Just as we close, just a reminder that it's National Inclusion Week. Do think about doing the daily challenges. There's loads of resources on our website that you can download and you can use them through the year. They're not just focused on this week. Obviously, inclusion, although National Inclusion Week is 7 days, inclusion needs to be a 365-day activity. So please do make use of all of those resources. If you're interested in coming to any other Inclusive Employers events, conferences or webinars, just take a look at the events page on the website and you'll see that there's a very wide range of topics, from very protected characteristics focused, for example, multi-generational workforces, Islam in the workplace, so very sort of deep dives on specialist topics, through to quite psychologically based things around introversion, extroversion, and some issues that are very topical around harassment, bullying, banter, and so on. So there's a very broad menu that we are constantly developing following conversations with our members. So I'm just going to say to Glenn a massive thank you for your input this morning. Lots and lots of wisdom, guidance, experience shared, and I hope you've all found it useful. I've certainly learned a huge amount. So thank you, Glenn. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
And thank you, Zainab, for our technical support. You're welcome. It's a bit like University Challenge. And thank you, everybody that joined the webinar. Have a great day.
Happy National Inclusion Week.